Well, this week it just keeps getting better for Canada. Here's what just landed on Washington's desk. NATO wanted to build its only satellite ground station in North America. And they didn't pick the United States, they picked Canada. And here's why that's so difficult for the Trump administration to absorb. This came from the alliance Trump has spent years threatening to walk away from. Well, he was simultaneously telling Canada it wasn't pulling its weight on defense. NATO looked at both countries and chose the one Washington was pressuring.
And this isn't just a courtesy gesture. NATO planners don't locate irreplaceable infrastructure based on goodwill. They put it where the commitment will hold for decades. So that choice tells you exactly what the alliance thinks of Trump and American reliability right now.
So let's be precise about where this stands. Documents obtained by the Logic through access to information confirm Canada and NATO are actively working on the plans. The Canadian Armed Forces have confirmed a feasibility study is underway. No location has been finalized and construction hasn't started yet, but here's the fact that matters. The proposal came from NATO. Canada didn't lobby for this. The alliance came north and asked us.
There's a meaningful difference between a government seeking recognition and an alliance selecting a partner. One is asking for a seat at the table. The other is being handed responsibility. And what we're watching is the second one.
And the economics of this are worth understanding clearly as well. NATO's communications agency funds the construction. Other allies contribute to operating costs. Canada provides the property and the long-term hosting commitment. Canada's not writing a large check here. The alliance is investing in Canadian territory because Canadian territory is where they need to be.
So, what does this satellite ground station actually do? Well, it's the connection point between operations on the ground and military satellites in orbit. Ships, aircraft, Arctic patrol units, commanders coordinating across borders. When primary communication systems are disrupted or compromised, this is how the alliance keeps talking in a secure way. It's redundant and non-negotiable.
NATO designated space as a full operational domain, alongside land, sea, air, and cyber. That happened officially. Satellites are now part of how wars are monitored, coordinated, and deterred. A ground station isn't peripheral here. It is part of the backbone of the whole system.
And to address what will immediately come up, there are no weapons involved here. NATO's purpose is protecting its communication, navigation, early warning, and intelligence capabilities. The mission is resilience, being harder to knock offline when things go wrong.
Here's the actual question NATO was asking, though. Their current satellite ground stations are clustered in Europe and Turkey, all of them in one region. If a major crisis compromises that network, like a coordinated cyber attack or military escalation in Europe, the alliance has a serious communications vulnerability. No North American coverage. One regional failure point for an entire continent's coordination.
For decades, the default answer to North American coverage would have been the United States. They have the biggest defense budget in the alliance. They have the largest military footprint. The assumed anchor for anything on this continent was the U.S., but the proposal is for Canada.
And Canada brings specific things to this conversation. Deep Arctic presence, 3 oceans of coastline, a long, unbroken NATO membership, and a government that treats its alliance obligations as binding commitments, not negotiating positions that shift based on domestic politics or however the president wakes up every morning.
There is also the Greenland dimension, which is significant. Greenland is a part of Denmark, a NATO ally, and it sits at the strategic center of the North Atlantic and Arctic. Canada-based infrastructure creates coverage across exactly the gap in the alliance's current network. Geography is doing real work here.
Now let's put the timing directly on the table. Trump has spent months applying pressure on Canada's defense spending, publicly, repeatedly, and with escalating demands. He moved the target from 2% of GDP, which Canada crossed for the first time since the Cold War, confirmed by NATO in March, all the way up to 5%, a number that would require Canada to more than double its current defense budget overnight. Washington's posture has been relentless pressure.
And while that campaign was running, while the Pentagon was pausing the Joint Board on Defense, while terrorists were flying, NATO was drawing up plans to put critical infrastructure on Canadian soil.
Washington is squeezing Canada. Nobody's debating that here. But NATO is asking Canada to host something important. One relationship is becoming more transactional by the week. The other is becoming more strategic. And the alliance didn't issue a press release about that contrast. They just drew up the plans quietly.
Power and reliability are not the same thing. A country can have the most advanced military capabilities in the world and still be the partner that other planners quietly root around when they need something to actually hold. Right now, the alliance is rooting way around Washington.
And here's what makes this more than just a diplomatic moment here. Canada is not showing up to this conversation unprepared. The Enhanced Satellite Communications Project, Polar. Canada is already building it with MDA Space and Telesat, a program designed to deliver secure military satellite communications across the Arctic, where standard satellite coverage has major operational gaps and where Canadian sovereignty has always been declared but struggled to be backed by real capability.
So when NATO arrives looking for a North American ground station, they're not asking Canada to start from zero. They're looking at a country already investing in exactly the adjacent capability. The expertise is already forming. The industrial partnerships, they're in place. So a NATO station would accelerate all of that.
And it builds something that Canada genuinely needs. A generation of workers trained on critical alliance-level communications infrastructure. Canadian companies holding the contracts. Canadian expertise that doesn't have to be borrowed from somewhere else when the security environment gets more complicated, which we have no doubt it will.
So listen, a feasibility study is not a guarantee. Plans, they can get delayed, and Canada has a history of that. But the alignment between what NATO needs and what Canada is already building is real. And that alignment is why the proposal points north.
So let's talk about the Arctic directly here because the strategic picture has changed faster than most Western governments ever anticipated. Russia is active across the north. New bases, new exercises, new territorial positioning. China formally calls itself a near-Arctic state and has been investing in Arctic-capable infrastructure accordingly. The shipping routes that used to be theoretical, well, now they're becoming commercially viable. The North is becoming a center of the country's security story. This is the infrastructure that makes that story real rather than just rhetorical.
Canada doesn't get to treat this as a win and just coast along, though. The feasibility study has to move. Procurement decisions have to follow. If NATO is prepared to commit to Canada as the partner for this infrastructure, Canada has to be prepared to build it on schedule, with Canadian workers, without disappearing into the kind of decade-long delay that has defined too many other defense projects here in Canada.
Yep, at some point, the country has to build the damn thing.
And build it right. The expertise that comes from hosting this infrastructure has to have training for Canadian workers to operate satellite communications at the alliance level. That stays here, and that's a generation of capacity that belongs to Canada long after this particular political moment passes.
So, here's the picture. Trump sees Canada as a country to pressure. NATO sees Canada as a country to invest in. Two completely different assessments of what Canada represents and what it's worth to the people making long-term decisions.
The alliance that Trump has questioned, threatened, and demanded payment from, that alliance just looked at North America and put its only satellite ground station in Canada. Not because Ottawa asked for it, but because Canada is a reliable partner and our geography is undeniable.
Useful is more often powerful than loud. And we're seeing that a lot these days. Canada has the geography. Canada has the Arctic access. Canada has the stability premium that Washington has just handed away. NATO's planners see all of that, and they're acting on it.
Yeah, Trump can't be trusted. He is acting far more like an enemy than an ally. So here's what we want to hear from you today. I want to hear, does Ottawa move fast enough to turn this into real capability, or does it get lost in the usual bureaucratic delay while the alliance loses patience and roots around Canada too?
because the window here is real, and so is the risk of squandering it. So let us know what you think down below. And don't forget, give this a hype, give it a share, give it a like, because it helps us reach a whole lot more people.
All the links are in the pinned comment, and we shall see you tomorrow, everyone.
Thanks for watching. Ciao for now.